because yesterday afternoon I had the video all set up and I forgot to start it. So at the end of the class I looked at it and there it was, waiting to be started. All right. So I'm going to go into Canvas, and I'm at the syllabus. If you want to, I'll give you a second if you want to go there. And I'm going to go to resources because there's a thing on troubleshooting there. And we'll talk about it a little bit. So if you need a minute to get there. If not, you can just look at it here. So under the resources, I'm going to hit troubleshooting. So you guys ready? Do you want to get it or you want to just go? We'll just go. Okay.
This is on
GitHub. No, this is actually on my blog, and the way to get to it is to go to the syllabus. Remember all those links? This links to the YouTube videos. This links to the blog. This actually, weirdly, links to a web page on my domain, and then from this, it links back to the blog. I just did that link because I made a list of all the relevant blogs, right? So this one's on debugging and troubleshooting. And when we start getting more complex programs, this gets to be more and more crucial. And in fact, when you're programming, I think troubleshooting is probably a better and more important skill than even just mastering the syntax, right? Because as you know, whenever you write a program, there are errors. And this will be true even if you become a highly paid programmer somewhere. Whenever you write a program, it's going to have errors. And you'll need to go through and figure out what those are. I think I've mentioned this before, but I want to go through them. There's 3 different kinds of errors, and there are different techniques for dealing with them. There's compile errors. Anybody know what those would be or have an idea?
Errors that happen when you're trying to compile and then
Right. So
and
they're usually syntax errors. They can be like a missing semicolon or a missing curly brace or case, something is in the wrong case because it is case sensitive. The nice thing about compile errors is that, at least in Visual Studio, they're all got little red squigglies under them and there are messages at the bottom. So typically you get a lot of information about these errors. And I'm going to show you some techniques for dealing with those. What are runtime errors? You've had them before.
Everything compiles, and then it gets to a certain point, and then something happens what you have not anticipated, like the number doesn't match.
Yeah, it's like,
Right.
It's like, when you put a letter at what it's supposed to look like an integer or something.
Right. So you're expecting an integer and you enter a word, or you're expecting an integer and you enter a double, and you do a dot in the thing. That will cause it to crash. There are other things that can happen. Sometimes you'll get to a point where a variable didn't get a value and you'll divide by 0, right? And it was perfectly fine in the compile because it assumed that there would be a value for that variable when you did the division, but for whatever reason you end up dividing by 0. That might throw an error. Also, sometimes something doesn't get declared properly. Like you can declare an array. You can say int square brackets my array semicolon. You've declared it, but you haven't initialized it. You haven't made it new. If you try to use an array without making it new, you'll have a runtime error. It won't notice that until you're actually running the program. Okay, so runtime errors are things that happen when you are running. All the compile errors have been fixed or you couldn't run. What are logical errors?
I guess when you try to do like a math calculation or something like that, it doesn't add up, right?
Right, you get the wrong answer, or the results are not what you want.
Or you have your methods in the wrong order.
Or you call your methods in the wrong order.
So you're calling something what hasn't happened yet?
Yeah, although that should cause a runtime error. Not always, yeah. Typically, a lot of logical errors are where a variable is getting a different value than you think it is. So the math is coming out wrong, or your order of operations is wrong when you're doing math. There are lots of different things. These are actually the hardest errors to find. These will tend to crash the program, right? And these won't even let you run. The logical errors run just fine. They just give you the wrong answers. And those are the hardest to debug, hardest to figure out where that's happening. One of the things, and we'll talk about it when we start testing, you should test it with values where you know what the answer is going to be. That way, if the answer is different, you know something is going wrong. I read somewhere that somebody figured that a lot of bank calculations are probably wrong because the programmers didn't understand the interest calculations of banks. They produce numbers, but they may not be the right numbers. So, I mean, again, that's a kind of a logical error that until it becomes something obvious, usually you don't notice it, right? So the errors aren't way off, but they're probably a little bit off. Okay, so let's, in the canvas, if you go to Files, I did a troubleshooting example. I did it as a text. So what we want to do is we want to copy and paste this into a new program. In Canvas here, unless you download it, you don't want to do a Control-A. So I'm just going to try to highlight it, either that or download it. It didn't work. I really don't like it, so I'm going to download it. I'm just going to download it to the desktop. Yeah, you should probably download it, unless you're really successful at. I think mine went not to the desktop, but to downloads. So I'm going to do open folder. That way you don't have to go search for it. Come on, open the folder. Did it open it behind Canvas? Yep. So here's the troubleshooting text. Okay, so I'm just going to open it. And now I can do Control-A, Control-C. And I'm going to start Visual Studio. And what we're going to do is we're going to paste it into there. If you need help with this, let me know. I'll come around and help you. You want me to do that again?
No, it seems to be different than the text that I got off the assignment page.
This isn't the assignment.
Oh, okay.
This is just a sample
Oh, this is
to practice
okay,
with.
sorry.
So the file is under Files. If you go to Canvas under Files, I'll walk through it again. I'm going to paste it in, and then I'll walk through it again. So before I do a new project and paste it, let's go back to Canvas. So where you find this is under Files. And then in Files, it's the troubleshooting example. And I opened it, but I think you really want to just download it. So if I click on it, it still does that, and then just download. Once you've downloaded it, then you can copy and paste it. So we'll do the paste now. Anybody still having trouble with that? So in the Visual Studio, do you guys need me to zoom this? There's the zoomer. We'll do what we've always done. File, New, Project. We'll make C# console app. I'm going to call it Troubleshooting Example. You can actually call it whatever you want, but I'm going to call it Troubleshooting Example. Going to do OK. And then just do inside of here, just do like a Control-A and Control V to copy what we had done. And I'm going to zoom down so you can actually see the code. There are lots of errors in this because that's the point. But
That's what I was thinking. I'm guessing there's supposed to be all these
Yeah.
errors when I'm looking at it.
and what we'll do is we'll talk through it, and then, as I said, we'll do the peer exercise so you can practice this kind of thing. So first, before we troubleshoot it, we should probably talk about what it does, right? So one of the things that it does is it creates an array, all right? So basically, and we're going to, I called it my random array, okay? This method returns that random array. Now, as I said, there's all sorts of errors in here, so we'll worry about those in a moment. Then it populates the array, right? So it puts the random numbers into the array. So this just creates the array. This method populates it. And then down here, they're not necessarily in order. We calculate the average. And I know that arrays in Microsoft have the .avg or .average, or it just calculates it for you, but I did the math. I also did the maximum, and again, I did the math rather than use the method. And in the minimum, I did the same thing, but used the math. And then we have a display. And the display basically creates a new array that it gets from populate array. And it displays all the values that are in the array. Here it calls those methods. Does that make sense? And then we have our posit so that it will last long enough that we can see it. Questions about those? So the idea again is that every step should have its own method, right? You figure out what all the steps are. Populate, creates an array, that's one step. Populates it with random numbers, that's another step. We want to return the average, so we'll calculate that as a step. The minimum as a step, the maximum, and then we'll display the outputs. Questions? Does that make sense? It's hard to get the thought of this and to know which sequence. And some of the sequence screwed up here because part of what we're looking for. One of the things I want to show you, so we have all these, we have a lot of red underlines. And you can go through those and look at those, but I also want to show you in view, and I'll zoom up. I know zooming up probably makes you seasick here, but I'm going to go to view. And one of the things that's not showing right now is the error list. So I just did that. I might leave it zoomed. Let me go down to the bottom, and it shows you some different errors. Okay, so you can always get this by going to view error list. I'm not entirely sure why it's not there by default. It usually is, but it doesn't seem to be in our setup.
Is that something you can add to
As
your
soon as you try to run it.
What
Can you pin it to your? Oh, you
well, I
can't.
mean, it should just be there, and it should stay there until you
Yeah.
tell it to get rid. Yeah, so view error list.
It's just a little button at the bottom. Oh, there it is.
Yeah, I've got. I was just thinking.
This is there a pin on this?
That would be good. Sure.
Yes, there is a pin on it.
Oh, you can pin it.
Yeah, way
Excellent.
over here. That's the
Okay.
trouble with the zoom. I can't see the screen. So it looks like it is pinned, because that would unpin it.
Okay.
And error list, and what I want to do, I will pin it. Okay. So one of the things that I want to suggest is that you, at the very beginning, you always start at the top with your error list. Because a lot of times if you fix one error, a whole bunch of others down below will disappear. Because errors tend to cascade through this. If you miss one point, it causes an error somewhere else. It causes an error somewhere else. So a lot of times it's best just to start at the top. There are, it tells you that we're missing a curly brace somewhere. Now, it doesn't always go where you think. If I double click this, it puts the cursor where it thinks the problem is, right? And in this case, Where does it belong?
Just pause it.
Right after posit. Now, I may have caused another error here because
Still.
the original curly brace was there. It just got moved down. Right? And one reason I did that is this is something I've seen in a lot of your code when there's a curly brace out of place. It's not that you forgot one, it's that you pushed it off down, you know, it's in the wrong place. So again, the little red squiggly there. And what's our first error down here? It says a semicolon expected. So it's actually not doing that, but I'll get rid of that. Let's go back up. Again, you can go through the errors. So if we do double click the curly brace, I mean the error, my brain is gone. Its cursor is on the curly brace and the little red squiggly is there, but where's the actual error?
So there's no semicolon.
Right, it said there was no semicolon where the error falls, and that's because this can't follow if this doesn't have a semicolon. Sometimes the error messages are in the area, but not right on where the error is. See how that took the curly brace away? The error. So we could kind of look at what's wrong with this one. We could go to the bottom, but no. What's going on with, how do you normally do a right line?
It doesn't have the brackets.
Yeah, you need parentheses, that's part of it. You can't, right line isn't an array, it's a method, right? So this needs curly braces. This won't do what we want it to do, though. Maybe we should wait on that. We'll come back to that and we'll see why. What's going on here?
Average hasn't been declared yet.
Right, average hasn't been declared, and there's another thing that's happening. Right, the return can't happen before anything after the return is dead code. Right, the return is the final statement of the method, no matter what. You could write a whole program under this, and it would be ignored, and it would have these little green lines saying that. And there's also probably a message. I don't know if it's down here of unreturnable code.
Unreachable code.
Unreachable code. Unreachable code detected. And it doesn't make it an error. It actually will compile with that. But it does warn you that that code can't be reached. Return has to be the very last thing. Does that make sense? So I'm just going to cut this and put it above it. You were right too, the order matters. You can't use a variable before you declare it. All right, what other red lines do we have? This one should be an easy one.
This is a capitalized L.
Yeah, capitalized L, and those are real common, right? If you're a typist like I'm a typist, that happens about every other time. So let's look back. Do we have any more errors? I'll go all the way down. So this is an object reference is required for the non-static field method or property. Program posit. Does that make sense to you? I'm going to double click it, and again, it'll go right up to where the problem is. You need a P dot. And why do you need a P dot? Well, yeah, because we created an instance of this program, and we named it P. You can name it whatever. Why do we have to create an instance of this program? Because this is in the program. Anybody remember?
Use that P dot to call it.
Well, we do, but notice this is static. Remember what static means? That's all right. Long weekend. Static means that it was loaded automatically into RAM, into memory, right? And because it's on the method, only the main method was loaded automatically into memory. The program class itself was not, just this method. And this is always static because main is the starting point and it has to be loaded into memory, right? So main is always static. Program is not static, and so we need to manually, this is just like we do with the arrays, we make them new. That means load them into memory, make them available to be used. And that's what this does. Another solution, and you'll see it in some books, is to make each of these methods static. Then they would all be loaded into memory. I don't like to do that. I mean, but you can. It's a solution that also works. To me, I don't want more things in RAM that need to be there. You know, if it's static, it's not only there when you load it, it stays there until everything is done. Whereas if you do it like this, it runs the method, and when it's done with it, it discards it. So it frees up RAM. It probably doesn't matter much in modern machines where you have massive amounts of RAM, but it still seems wasteful to me to call them all static. All right, we still have one error. Let's see if it's in the error list. Int does not contain a constructor that takes one argument. That might seem a little bit weird. What does that mean? Int does not take have a constructor that takes one argument.
In this case, it needs square brackets.
It needs square brackets, exactly, because parentheses means that it's a method signature, but this is actually an array. Array uses square brackets.
I'm sorry, what line is that on?
Good question. 36 on mine. So what I did is I did parentheses always signify a method, like parse, right? Console readline. And this is really getting parentheses and square brackets confused is really easy to do. So arrays and collections of all kinds, because there are other things besides arrays that are collections of things, always have square brackets in C#. So I think we've hit all of the compile errors.
No, I didn't catch that one.
Which one?
You already went through it, I think. Under the for each, where the console right line,
Oh,
that one.
so did this we had square brackets, right?
Oh.
You need to.
Oh, so it needs parentheses.
It needs parentheses.
Okay.
Others that you didn't catch, or I go on to the runtime errors?
Where return averages on line 67, I still have an error at average.
What do you have?
It's saying local variable int average. Cannot use local variable average before it's declared.
Do you have these flipped still?
Oh, yes, I do. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay, are we ready to try to run it? So I run it. There are some runtime errors that so I'm going to enter the size of the array. Let's not make it very big. 4 sounds good. I get all zeros, and then it crashes.
Oh.
Notice that it says unhandled exception, system divide by 0. So why is that?
Because it needs to be divided by total.
Well, actually, so the size is the size of the array, theoretically, because we used it as the variable. But notice when I mouse over it, it says that it's 0.
It has to be greater than, which is 0.
Well, so let's look at where does size get its value?
Oh, int size equals 0?
Yeah.
Up at the top?
We have int size equals 0 here. We also have int size equals console read line here. What's happening between those two? And this is something that happens when you have methods. This is something you probably don't encounter when you really
It's getting too computing values.
It is. It's getting, so this is at class level, right?
Yeah.
So it's declared at class level. Remember when I said that the scope of the variable is the curly braces it's declared in? The curly braces for this int size are the begin class, end class. So it could be seen anywhere. But what happens when you declare another variable of the same name inside of a method? I'm not sure if I told you, so I'm just seeing if you can guess.
Last one overrides it, doesn't it?
This overrides that
Oh, right.
for here, right? But this variable, because it's local, has the curly braces of this method. So size, when I go down here, where I divide by size, this is the class variable. But the class variable never got that 4 because that was only local to that method. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's a little confusing. It has to do with the scope. But if you have two variables that have the same name, the more local one gets precedence inside the method. So this one takes over for here. But down here, the size is coming from the top, and it's still 0. The solution for that, if you're going to leave it class level, is to get rid of the int here. Yeah. If I get rid of the int there, then all of them will reflect the global one. And if we run, it should. Oh, I need to stop. And if I run. So let's do 4 again. Okay. It worked, except everything else is 0. Yeah, we still got runtime problems. Or these might actually be logic problems.
These are logic problems.
Yeah, these are logic problems because it ran. Right? All the compile errors are handled, and it ran, but we have all these zeros. These are harder to fix. So one of the things you can do is you can just sort of pore over this until your eyes bug out, trying to figure it out. Or, so the size is working now. Why? So this, I'm going to put one of the things you can do is you can put a break in. We've done this before to look at things. This is for troubleshooting, for logical problems in particular.
To run up until line 44 or line 44.
Yeah, it'll run up to line 45 or 44, wherever I have it. And then it will break, and we can walk through here. One of them is that I want to see if it is actually getting the any value here. And there's a simple thing that I'll show you, but let's run it and look at this. So I'm going to enter the size of the array. Okay, so at this point I'm down here. I'm going to do F11. And once I do that, the number is 904. So there is a number there. And we do it again, and the number is 200. And the number, actually I have to press F11 to have a new number. The number is 124. So we are getting numbers. What's not happening? Anybody have a guess?
You're returning my array as opposed to a number.
Well, we're returning my array, right? But we're not assigning any values to the array, right? We're assigning the values to the number. We're not assigning any values to the array. Does that make sense? Let's fix it and we'll see. So there's one piece missing here where we have to say my array, lowercase m, square brackets I for the counter, equals number. Now you could do this without the intermediate step of creating the variable, but you could just say my array I equals rand next. But we were never assigning anything to the array. We were returning the array. It had 4 empty slots, right? Does that make sense? Yeah.
I'm an error. I can get out of the error for number 4.
Let me see.
What's the,
Oh, after after the cycle, it's 67.
So 67.
Yeah, now you might have, if you get rid of it, like the very bottom, okay, that's probably the only thing. All right, so I'm going to run this again. So we'll do the 4 again. And everything is where minimum value is 0.
Yeah.
Or the maximum is 0, but the minimum is. That's actually got to be wrong.
Backwards.
It's backwards, but there's no 0 in here. Well, let's look at what we got. So down in the display things, well, minimum, calculate maximum. So let's go look at those methods.
you have the greater than less than swap.
I do. I have those things swapped. Again, that's a logic error. So the max, but why is the minimum 0?
That's what I was just trying to figure out.
So it's not giving a value.
So you have the end,
Well, if you have
min equal to 0.
yeah,
Yeah, that's fine. It should be reassigned.
but then does the min equal to I? Is that why it's not calling I? It's just calling.
Right. You need to, actually in both of these,
I think if you.
no, that should be all right, actually. Let me look
Still
again.
0, 0. That's not right.
Still 0. The minimum value is 0. So the minimum isn't working. So minimum is 0 for each int and I in our array. Oh, I know why. It's something I did. Well, no, that's not right. It's being called here. We're passing it an array. That's interesting. Why are we getting... So this is where we could put in
Oh,
a...
wait, I think
What did you do?
No, never mind. All right. I thought I knew. And I was like,
So I'm going to... We'll do the 4 again. Oh. Oh, yeah, that's fine. So it's broken on the min. I put a stop by the for each for this. So if I look at the array here, I want to show you some neat things you can do. If I click the little arrow here, it gives me all the values in the array. The IntelliSense on helping you through you can be really useful for you. All right, so if I do F11, all right, so the minimum at this point is 0, and I do F11, and now the minimum is still 0. Oh, so where does min get its value?
Oh,
Where did I get max here? Because that worked. No, it's just a variable. It should just work. So I is 44. The min is still 0. I is 44. If min is greater than I, or less than I, oh, you know why? What is less than 0?
Oh, so
Oh, so
it's a size.
so it should be less than one, or I mean less than.
In size.
The minimum should be 1.
Oh, keep the one there.
Should be if minimum is less than I, because whatever I is isn't gonna be less than
Just get rid of
Right.
it there. No, you didn't.
I'm trying to think. Do you guys have a good solution for this? I'm trying to think of how I want to assign. We need to know what the value is. The first value is, so if I
Is greater than.
want to say min, so if it's min equals I, this is a puzzle I hadn't thought about. I mean, we could always use the minimum thing, but if we're doing the logic of it, well, we have our array. Instead of signing this to 0, let's do our array square bracket. You guys know what that does? Well,
So it assigns 0 to.
it doesn't assign 0, it assigns the first element in the array
Okay.
to minimum.
Okay.
And it doesn't matter if it's the smallest, because we'll be comparing them after that. Right, so it assigns the very first value in the array to this. Let's see if that works. So I'm going to stop it. So I'll do 4 again. And that is correct. That did work. What error did you get since it's troubleshooting?
Null errors. Syntax error. Sorry. Value extended, so I must have. Oh.
So you just.
I didn't put a value into our array.
Oh,
There we go.
yeah, so
Yeah.
0 means the first position. Anyone else?
Say my minimum was 5 here and my max was 8.
Oh, so you just have them reversed somehow. So one of the things that I did, and this is one of the things I had done on purpose, is I had reversed the signs. So just flip the signs for minimum versus max. That I had done on purpose. This part I hadn't.
I'm totally behind because mine's still populating with all zeros.
So let's walk through it and see what we did for the logical errors. So we handled all 3 kinds of errors, which was the main thing. So we're couple of places where it populates with all zeros. Let's go back up where we populate the array. You're probably missing something like this. Like this is on like about 42, 40, about 46. 7:47.
Oh,
Let's see, right there, my array. Video stop. So my array square brackets equals number. Because if we don't do that, you have to sign it.
Oh, for them to spell.
Yeah, Mr. Array.
I do.
And I actually.
Except the minimum value is still.
Yeah.
I've actually got an error message that's line 68 that I can't figure out.
Yeah. Oh, the only thing is that you probably have your minimum maximum, the arrows.
no, at the top.
So does that help any for troubleshooting? Because you're going to be troubleshooting all the time. I mean, it's just sort of an introduction. Other questions on this before we go on? Yeah.
I don't get the minimum, how we get the maximum.
Is there something here where you do calculate maximum, calculate minimum?
That line doesn't, there's no.
I don't know why that would be.
I think they may have changed.
Yeah, I got that. I'm putting, zero.
Oh.
That might be.
Huh?
Might
Might help. I don't know. You might be able to.
All right, one other thing I'm going to have you guys do, and then we'll talk a tiny bit about the next assignment. So I'm going to unzoom.
So very quickly, I know there was something that we fixed a while ago that I must have missed.
Okay.
So getting the divisible by 0 error.
So where I defined size, I'm looking for that. Do you still have int size here?
Yeah. So yeah.
Get rid of the int. Because what that does is it redeclares the variable, so it's separate from the outside variable. So I am going to leave, I'm going to close this.
So within a class, you can only declare a variable once.
No, but you shouldn't ever declare it. You should never name the same variable, although with the exception maybe like loops where you're doing int I.
Yeah.
That you can do. But if you declare a variable at class level, and then you redeclare it inside, the local one has precedence over the class one.
But best form is that you.
Best form, you should never have two variables with the same name.
Okay.
At least two significant variables with the same name.
Right. I'm also studying Python and they let you switch or they let you do that.
So are you doing classes in Python though yet?
I'm just studying.
Yeah, so those are just loose free-form functions that are each independent of each other, right? In C#, everything has to be in a class.
Right.
And in Python, it's a little bit like C++ or something in that you can have functions that don't have a class, or you can build classes.
Okay. So C#'s a little more.
C#'s more
regulated.
Yes, I was going to say more anal. It's strongly typed. It's 100% object oriented. One of the reasons why a lot of people like Python is that it's kind of loose and it makes it easier to just sort of speedily code because you don't have to worry about the structure so much.
Right.
Does that mean that it can make errors?
Yes, one One of the advantages of a structured language like C++ is it forces you into good habits. Whereas you can write really horrible Python code. You can also write really beautiful Python code. Same is true of PHP. I've read a lot of web pages that have the most god-awful, unreadable PHP code in the world. There's nothing in PHP that makes you write good code. You can write good code with PHP. You can break things up and you can make it logical and you can make it structured in a way that is very readable. But I've seen a lot of PHP code that was just a jumble. Still works, but it's a mess. Really impossible to troubleshoot. And the same can happen with Python. Python, again, because of its structure, if you're careful, you can write really clear, structured programs, but you can also write garbage. In C++, you can still write garbage, but it's harder. I mean, not C++, but C#, because the structure is forced on you. And every variable has to have a data type and things like that. So that being said, Python is growing in popularity and C# is declining a little bit if you look at the numbers of people using it. It's for speed and convenience. It's faster. It's not faster in execution. Actually, C# is faster in execution, but it's faster to develop. Compiled languages tend to be faster.
It seems simpler, I can see.
In C#, Python. One of the things that you'll find, all of your languages basically do the same things. And some have some skills that are better than others for certain things. But mostly it's a matter in the end of either who your employer makes you write, what language they make you write, or you find one that you just like for some reason. I mean, generally, as I said, they have mostly the same capabilities. They do essentially the same things. They all loop. They all have if statements. They all, have series of commands. They almost all of them break things into functions. Most of them allow you to write in class structures and object structures, which when you get more complex is usually a good idea. Things like PHP they're scripted languages, which means they compile line by line. So sequence matters a little more in those. Whereas with C# or some of these others, they're all compiled, and Java, it's compiled all at once. That's why it doesn't matter what order your methods are in, right? Because it can see them all. Once it's compiled, it knows where they all are. Anyway, there is a peer exercise for troubleshooting. And it's basically something kind of like what we just did, except a little simpler. It's basically a program for calculating pi, the circumference of a circle. Actually, I have the area and the circumference. I'm going to just highlight it in here. And I will go to Visual Studio. I'm going to let you guys do this, but it's the same process. File, new, project. I'm not going to name it. I'm going to highlight everything, paste over it. And there are some errors in it of different kinds. So what I want you to do in your peer groups, and if I look at Canvas again, if you go to people, there should be a peer troubleshoot. And again, some of you do it alone. But what I want you to do is just give it a shot. Maybe join a peer group and give it a shot correcting the errors in there. And then we'll talk about it in a few minutes.
Where was this again?
So this is in the
Assignment?
it's in assignments under peer troubleshoot.
Okay.
And basically just copy and paste that code into a new project and then just see if you can fix it. What I think you might want to do, what we'll talk about is what problems you found and fixed. So there's a few compile errors. I think there's a couple of other little errors, I think, too. There aren't too many. There aren't as many errors as what we just did. Peer troubleshooting. So the group is probably way down in the bottom.
Now, where's the code, in the blog?
No, it's in the assignment. If you go to assignments and then peer troubleshoot, so peer exercise troubleshooting. And that's the code. I will post the code that we did together. I will be right back too.
Let me send you this first. Yeah. Or you can do 7 if you want to do 7, or you can do whatever.
No, I would love to do that exercise.
Did you get yours to work?
There it is.
I got it to work and so it was no.
You maybe can compare your 2 side by side. And then
Okay.
that's that. Cool.